I'm Nick Westergaard, and this is On Brand, helping you tell your story. Design is about more than just how something looks. It's about how it works for the people using it. On this episode of On Brand, I'm joined by Lee Hoddy, Executive Director at Conran Design Group, to discuss how experience-led design can solve complex brand problems. We'll dive into how he leads multidisciplinary teams to create meaningful work for global names like Sofitel and AstraZeneca, and why every great brand starts with a deep understanding of human needs, wants, and motivations. My interview with Lee is coming right up, but first, Lee, welcome to On Brand.
Hi, Nick. Hi, how are you? Delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
Now, you've said that great brands start with understanding people. When you're kicking off a major rebranding like you did for Sofitel, how do you actually get to the heart of those human motivations before a single pixel is moved?
Yeah, that's a great question, Nick. I guess at Conran, we're really quite obsessed with experiencing customer journeys. So I think the opportunity to look outside of the known touch points to really, I guess, go deep on the experience, to map the emotions, understand the friction points, the motivations, the expectations. I mean, it's a fairly intense stage, but a hugely valuable one. So I guess really we're looking to uncover the moments in the experience that can really shape the perception of a brand. So, typically you'd start a project, you might look at the sort of key signatures or touch points, but really getting into that sort of emotional mapping and understanding those sort of moments of friction and experience are the sort of where the gold is, really, I think, in terms of building a brand.
So I want to build on that a little bit because you talked about, the emotional mapping. And I think we hear things like that talked about when it comes to the work of branding. But I think some get a little stumped on what that actually looks like. So and I would imagine it's many different forms, but what are some of the different forms that emotionally mapping a brand can look like?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. I mean, I guess in the case of Sofitel, it's millions of sort of micro moments, if you like. So it's finding the sort of rituals, the cultural moments, the sort of touch points that really add to the experience. They're the sort of human motivations, if you like, that really enable you to design with empathy. So quite often you'll do desk research, you'll understand a brand, you'll interrogate the brief, you'll talk to the client. But really the sort of gold is, meeting the people, understanding the customer journeys, really getting under the skin of how they experience the brand. And they're the emotional moments, if you like, that you can kind of map into the experience. And, obviously then you pair that with your positioning or your sort of creative idea to, effectively create new moments in the experience, new cultural moments, and, find something that really, really connects with those customers, those consumers, but also that creates that point of difference in the brand experience. I guess increasingly brands are becoming a little more regimented. I guess, with AI and other technologies, there's a sort of familiarity out there, a bit of a sea of sameness. So, in those moments, you find, the opportunity to differentiate. So, yeah, when we talk about that, that's really effectively what we mean.
So we talk about finding those human moments that are part of the brand experience. You've led creative for some very corporate brands like AstraZeneca. How do you bring high-level, human-centric design to industries that maybe traditionally are seen as more functional, cold?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess I think there's an opportunity within every project to, there's a pursuit by every organization, isn't it? And I think, probably the clients that we work with, there's an alignment of ambition. So they may be in hospitality, they may be in healthcare, they may be in automotive, but I think there's an alignment of ambition. And, I think you need to find within the brief the sort of pursuit of human endeavor, the sort of breakthroughs that might make a difference to people's lives. So, but at Conran, we always talk about, progress and thoughtful design that can enable and inspire that progress. So I guess it's no different from a big pharma company or an automotive business or a hospitality business. There's just there's moments in the experience where you can really create moments of humanity. And, I guess businesses like AstraZeneca and other big players in that space, they're looking to, make connections, more meaningful connections with their stakeholders, HCPs, patients. So you've got to find the same human moments in the experience, I think, to really cut through.
So, storytelling and design are often two sides of the same coin. How do you ensure that the brand story remains consistent as it moves from a strategic idea to something that is part of a physical or digital experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, well, I think fundamentally storytelling is a really crucial part of building a brand. I mean, clearly, it sort of operates on another level of engagement. So, we all connect with stories in a really sort of meaningful way. I think they provide that sort of identity and dimension to a brand. So, I think storytelling starts with the ability to uncover a truth about a brand. So, when we meet clients and, we go on that journey together of building a brand, we'll interview a lot of people, we'll meet a lot of people, there'll be sort of boots on the ground to really connect with staff, general managers. And in the case of a hotel brand, you've got to meet a wide range of people. So I think once you understand their stories, it brings together a more thoughtful and more meaningful positioning. So the story at the center of that brand is more authentic, true, if you like. And then that enables you to build a positioning that's really powerful, that's really authentic, and create something that feels a little more sticky, if you like. So, that enables you to then sort of layer on the stories throughout the brand experience. But there's this DNA, this thread that holds true throughout that experience. Again, that's built very much on that sort of authenticity of storytelling. So I think again, back to, whether you're a pharma brand or an automotive brand, stories are the opportunity to sort of build that differentiation, build meaning, I guess, build a bit of understanding and empathy with a brand. So, they can effectively convert that sort of maybe passive interest in a brand into something that's a bit more, a bit more trusted and creating a bit of belief. So, hugely important stories in building brands.
So, how do you, with every place that a brand is expected to show up, how do you find, like you said, that kind of common, consistent thread of story and ensure that it is coherent across all of the different places where we expect to find brands today?
Yeah, I think, I mean, the whole sort of story construct, I think, is a great way of looking at a brand, because I think, you have protagonists, players, chapters, a beginning and an end. So I think beyond creating assets, a really clear positioning, so there's a really powerful story at the heart of it. There are components, players in the story, if you like, that are the consistent threads across the brand experience. So no matter whether it's a piece of sort of sonic signature or an app design or a sort of moment in an airport experience, for example, I think the sort of levers of that story that create that sort of originality and authenticity are the same across all of those touch points. point. So again, I think seeing sort of protagonists and players in the story, so really thinking about it in quite a three-dimensional way when you're building a brand is really crucial.
On Brand will be right back after this. Now, back to the show. So, speaking of the players, as you were talking about with characters in the story, you talk a lot about leading multidisciplinary teams. And I think in the agency business, that can be a real challenge because it's a business that's historically siloed. How do you foster collaboration, meaningful collaboration between a diverse team that includes designers, business strategists, experience experts? It's a lot of different kinds of people.
Yeah, absolutely. We're quite a broad church of a business, so we have maybe more than others quite a range of skills and creative talent within the business. So I think in terms, I mean, it's really as an orchestra, really, conducting that orchestra. I think from the outset you've got to have a culture of collaboration. So you need each silo needs its framework, it needs its operating codes, it needs its way of managing its particular skills, expertise, and process. But I think the agency needs a sort of culture of collaboration from the outset to bring those audiences together. I think that's critical in building great sort of synergies and collaboration with those audiences. I think on a project basis, I think you've got to. I think as creative leaders, particularly, you've got to surface the sort of ambition in the project, because I think if you can kind of elevate the discussion from the outset around the opportunity, the ambition in the brief, you sort of take everyone outside of their comfort zone a little bit, but you also take them out of their space of unconscious bias, if you like. So everyone is a level playing field. Everyone is contributing to the sort of shared success of that brief. Thinking about the opportunity, the ambition of that brief. So I think number one, you need a sort of cultural ethos of collaboration. Number two, I think, always surface the ambition in the brief that everyone can unite behind before everyone tucks into their particular lanes and starts doing the work. So I think maybe that's where the disruption is, particularly around generating ideas. So which is the space that I'm obviously responsible for.
So it all comes down to the brief. But what would you say? Just out of curiosity, what makes a good brief? Because I feel like it's kind of become something that's taken on a life of its own, started with best intentions, and like so many pieces of communication in the world of work, it can get bloated with jargon and even agency speak that can disconnect us from meaningful conversation around the brand. So is there an unlock there that you and the team use for a brief that helps not only get everyone on the same page, but like you said, elevates?
Yeah. I think there's it's sort of twofold, the answer there. I think the opportunity to interrogate the brief initially with the client. So typically it's a client brief or a mediator or some function of the marketing department, etc. So I think having a stage of really understanding that brief, interrogating it, and then I think working together in the early phase. I mean, particularly in the case, say, of a rebrand or major piece of sort of branding project or program. Then I think in those early phases, there's a sort of revisit to the brief, a sort of brief 2.0, if you like, where you can really really, take on board key learnings from initial engagements from clients, initial maybe sort of mapping of consumer experiences or stakeholder interviews, and then really come back together with the learnings, the insights, and sort of build brief 2.0 that's really sharper maybe than the original. Maybe it inherits the original ambition of that brief, but then moves into a place where it's informed by the discussion, the workshops, the sort of early tussles around the sort of areas of focus and the opportunities. I think that's really critical. I mean, as a creative team, and there's the brief, there's the sort of big brief, if you like, but we always like to internally bring quite a diverse team together around that brief. So before your first question around, before we even a pixel's even moved, there's quite a big step and discussion around that brief. Where might that go? What is the opportunity to connect with those audiences? What is the inherent ambition in that brief? And just making sure that there's a sort of mini step between signed off brief and the sort of project getting into the sort of full phases of work of, building the strategy, creating the identity, etc. So, yeah, sounds like quite a lot of interrogation of the brief, but we found that it creates, it creates the sort of cadence in the process, and it creates, I guess, a kickoff that's more on point and has, a lot of energy in it to sort of deliver the best work. So ultimately, that's what we like. Sounds like that might take forever, but it's really quite a quick process.
Well, and like so many things, it may take some time, but as really definitely worth the time for the team as well. Now, before, out of my own curiosity, I took you down the brief rabbit hole. You were mentioning that so much of your work is around idea generation, and I, of course, would not be a podcast in the year 2026 if I didn't say, so idea generation and AI feels both helpful and a slippery slope, and potentially a creator of some anxiety in the business. So, as a leader, where do you land on AI exploration and application and work?
Well, it's a big question, and I guess it's a question we ask ourselves every day. I mean, I'm fortunate enough to be in this business long enough to have lived through these big kind of shifts. So, I mean, for sure that there are a lot of threats, in terms of the way that we create brands, the way agency models need to change, etc. I mean, almost anything is possible with technology these days. So, but I think I've been in the business a long time, so I think it's fair to say that you can be excited by what's possible in technology, but you can also hold on to some things that are the sort of constants that have remained throughout the sort of last 20, 30 years, really. So, and I think we're already seeing people switching off to the sort of, the automation and the sort of sea of sameness that exists. So, I feel very excited about what technology can do, but I also feel very motivated by building brands that feel a little bit more alive and less automated. So, almost that you could see the mind that created them. So I think that's particularly important, because I think consumers are particularly switching on to the sea of sameness that exists. So I think there's a huge opportunity. It's a wide open door, really, isn't it? I think more than ever we need to we need the currency of a good idea. We need a bit of originality to cut through. So I think, if anything, it just puts more pressure on creative people to generate that. But that's also really exciting. So and I'm particularly motivated by what technology can do, but also what a big idea can do to just cut through everything. And obviously, technology has given us the opportunity to execute quicker, develop more original assets, I guess, create unbelievable films and things that would maybe take weeks a decade ago now take minutes or less. So yeah, it's exciting, I think, what's coalescing out there.
So as a leader, is Conran thinking about with clients having question about AI and their work? Are there guardrails? Are there policies? Are there or is that something that you aren't seeing a lot of questions from on the client side?
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of questions. I mean, there's an expectation maybe over the speed of delivery, because they're maybe seeing what's possible. There's a sort of blurred line between where the agency begins and where the client team or internal teams take over that process. So I think there's the biggest area of questions, and these are the questions that I can't answer honestly. It's on sort of legal and sort of ownership. So there's a lot of questions around IP, and I guess particularly rightly so in many walks of life and client sectors, particularly in healthcare. The authenticity of and origin of those assets, ideas, particularly important. So. So that's a big question that comes up. I think many clients are seeing an opportunity to maybe manage and administer their brands differently. So what used to be maybe the brand manager or the chief marketing officer owning the brand toolkit and the sort of the way that that's administered now. Obviously, there are a sort of automation and agentic AI, etc. All of those things are contributing to the way that a brand's delivered at scale, particularly for the sort of big global brands. So I think that there are a lot of questions around the guardianship. How do we make sure that brand is consistent? Is the right tone of voice when it shows up in an environment? So those are the sorts of questions that come through quite often, but increasingly what we're seeing is questions around originality and point of difference, because I think already, and a great deal of technology continues to sort of shape the brand experience, but increasingly I think clients are quite switched on to that sea of sameness. So and obviously agencies and the originality of ideas is the opportunity to really cut through, create that relevance, create that surprise, really. So I think there'll be more questions around that, and obviously more opportunities for agencies to continue to sort of surprise with great ideas. So I think those are the sort of key themes that are coming through.
Especially as you talk about the strategy and framing a useful brief that guides the team. I think that kind of thinking is a critical piece of the process. So to lighten up from the at times heavy AI talk, it is now my turn, Lee, to get to ask you for a brand that's made you smile recently.
Yes, well, many recently. There were two actually, but I'll share my first. So the first is the latest venture Beyond campaign from Hermes. It's obviously a very elegant brand. It prides itself in beautiful products. They just created this campaign that has these lovely illustrations. They're really evocative in their storytelling. they have these little creatures that sort of venture across the ocean. They're obviously wearing beautiful products from Hermes, but there's just a lovely sort of joy and humanity in the work that's that really cuts through. I think, particularly at the moment, there's a sort of craft and imagination. But on a sort of serious point, it's just wonderfully charming and beautiful. But on a serious point, it sort of speaks to that idea of meticulous technique. It sort of represents the brand's, I guess, artisanal craft, if you like. So I think again, I can share the reference, obviously, for the benefit of this podcast. But it's a really beautiful bit of work. I love the fact that they've commissioned, real illustrators, animators. I think you can tell that there's real craft and effort that's got into it, and I think as a piece of work, it just invites a bit of curiosity. So, there's a lot of respect for the intelligence of the audience. So, I think it really does connect in a way that many brands in that space don't connect at the moment, I guess. So,
yeah. Go ahead.
No. Sorry. And there was one other, if I may.
Please.
The other was the Apple Critter Carol, which launched during the festive season. So I think it's just a lovely shift in that space, particularly where there's again so much similarity in the advertising of the big consumer electronics and phone brands. And it's that classic tale of friendship, connection. So it's called the Critter Carol. I think everyone's seen it. I think it really connects emotionally. It's the story of these critters that they discover the lost iPhone, all shot on a 17 Pro, of course. And again, it's just another example of something that's really charming, deeply human. There's no CGI. It's all about the puppets and the sort of lovely imperfection of creativity at work. So I thought that was a really powerful example of Apple continuing to put creativity at the heart of its brand thinking.
Well, and as you were saying that, right before you said, I was thinking deeply human, and then you went and said it, because that's exactly what it is. Lee, where can folks go to learn more about who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. So we have a page dedicated to that on the website. So ConranDesignGroup.com. So you'll find more information there. Anything you need from that history to my role in the business and some of the work I look after.
Awesome. Well, we will link up to all of that in our show notes, which folks can find at onbrandpodcast.com. Lee Hoddy, thanks for being on brand with us.
Thanks very much, Nick.
On Brand is part of the Marketing Podcast Network. If you like what you're hearing, if we've made you smile, you can always listen free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your favorite platform may be. And please take a moment and rate and review the podcast to help others find the show. Until next week, I'm Nick Westergaard, and I'll see you on the internet.